Reading messages is cool, but listening to them is even better. So in this video, we will use ElevenLabs to... Wait, why am I telling you this? Why am I even speaking myself?
We will take AI-generated summaries of unread messages and allow the users to read them out.
They can even select from a range of voices to do that.
Well, that sounds awesome. So let's do it. Here's what we'll build. We have an existing chat application built with Next.js and shadcn. And we have a couple of channels with unread messages. So we can tap on the "What did I miss" button here. It will use a local LLM to generate summaries for us. And what we can do now is we can select a voice from this drop-down. Let's do Paul. And then we can tap here and listen to what it's saying.
Cassandra's new obsession is beachcombing, replaced by a fascination with finding light switches and identifying crab pots. Test user reported seeing the time 11:11 or 12:34 on their clocks.
We can also select other voices as we like, or we can even read out everything. In part 1, we built in the local language model that generates these summaries. So if you want to see this, feel free to tap the link somewhere up here. But for this one, we have a repository to get started. So let's show this. We can go to this repository. I will add a link in the description of the video, of course. And we have a branch here, which is called ElevenLabs Starter, which we can clone to our machines. So let's do that. We can switch to the terminal and here add the following command, which is git clone. We only want to clone the ElevenLabs Starter branch. We don't care about the other branches. And then we add the link, which we can copy from here. When we execute this, the project will be cloned locally, and we can now switch into the folder and open this up in VS Code. So let's first run the project to see if everything works. We can go install the dependencies using yarn. We can now run the project using yarn dev. And if we switch to the browser and go to localhost 3000, we will be greeted with this error message, because we need to add the environment variables to run the project. So let's create a new file. We have an example file how this needs to look. So let's create a .env.local file. Let's copy over these credentials and let's grab them. So first we can head over to dashboard.getstream.io and create a project. It's free to sign up, and I will add a link in the description. And then we can go to our project and copy the key, paste this here, copy the secret and paste it here. However, we still need the ElevenLabs API key. And for that, we can sign up on their page. We can go to the dashboard, and I will also add a link to this in the description, of course, but we can go there. And once we have that, we can go to our profile, API keys, and then we can create one, or I even have one already. We can copy this and paste it in our project. And with that, the environment should be set up. So if we head back to our project and refresh this, we see the app is now loading. We can tap on the "What did I miss" button. And if you want to see the additional setup, I again refer to the video about integrating the LLM here. But for now, we have finished this setup and can now start with the implementation. We will start off by building the UI to read out the messages. So let's jump directly into VS Code. And we are opening a file called unread message summaries, which is the component that's displaying the alert as well as the summaries themselves. So here we can scroll down and we see we have the alert dialog with the trigger of the button, which says, "What did I miss?" So this is specifically what we can tap here. Once we tap this, the dialog opens and the unread messages are generated. And then we have a table here with the table header of the different columns that we have. So for now we have channel and summary. And here's what we will actually start, because we want to have one more called action. So if we go here, we see the action column is now popping up. By the way, this is all shadcn code, and I will add a link to the shadcn library in the description of the video. But with the action column now being available, we can scroll down because here we have the table body. And here we have two cells, the channel name and the summary for each of the channels that we have. So here we'll want to add one more with a read button. And so we'll add one more table cell, and inside we create a button that says read, and we give it an ARIA label to be accessible, which says read summary for channel name. The tab index will be 0, and we add some styling to it. If we save now, we see the read button is here. The logic will be added in the next step, but for now we'll focus on AI. But we also want to have an option that says read out everything, which is exactly what we will add next, because we have the footer which has the close button. But here we also want to add one more button which says read all. I'm saving this, and we have the read all button. And here we can already start with some logic, because what we can do is add a onClick function and create a summary, which is simply doing a mapping of all the individual channel summaries, starting with the channel name and then the summary, and then join them with new lines. For now, let's log this out to see if it works. And what we can do is we switch and we tap on the read all button. And if I open this in the console, we should now see the summary. We have each channel, and then we have the channel with the summary. So if this is going to be read out, this works just perfectly. This already marks the completion of all the UI that we needed. So let's jump directly into the cool part, the integration of ElevenLabs into the project. This requires a few steps. First, we will install the ElevenLabs dependency. Then we need to initialize the client from ElevenLabs and generate the audio messages server-side. We will use the server actions from Next.js for this. If you're not familiar with server actions, I'll add a link in the description of the video so that you can read up on them. In short, it's enough to know that we can specify the use server directive, and with that the code will be executed server-side. So let's jump in directly. We go back to VS Code and first install the dependency for the @ElevenLabs/ElevenLabs.js dependency, and then run yarn-dev again to have our project back up running. Then we will need to add a few functions to make this happen. And to get started, we will add two folders inside the app directory, one called hooks and one called actions. We will add a few files here now. So let's start by adding a utils.ts function inside the actions folder. And for this, we start off by declarating a function. We call it getElevenLabs client, which is just a convenience function for us to actually grab the client easily. We add a dry catch block and first take the API key from the environment. Remember, we've added this before. And then we check for the API key. If it's not there, we return an error, which we have as a convenience type. So we added a types file here that has these types with generics attached to them. So we should return error if that happens. Then we import the ElevenLabs client and initialize it with the API key that we just imported. In the error case, we will just extract this and return an error. We also generate a handle error function that we just use for convenience, where we take the error message and return the error, similar to here. With this, we can create another file. We call this stream_speech.ts. Here, we now set the use server directive. So we want this code to only be executed server-side. Then we add a bunch of imports that we will need in a second. And then we create a stream speech function that gets a voice ID as an input and a request, which is going to be of type text to speech request. And we will turn a readable stream, which is going to be the voice output. First, we use the just created getElevenLabs client function to get a client. And if this was not successful, we return error. and then we add a try catch block again. And first we extract the client value from the client result. We call the client.text-to-speech.convert function, which takes this specific voice ID that we put in, as well as the request, to create a streaming return. Then we create a pass-through object, which is just a temporary object to pass the stream along. And we create a new async function here. Start with the try catch block again, and then for each chunk of the stream that we're receiving from the ElevenLabs client, we buffer them and then write the buffer into the pass-through object that we just created. After that's finished, we call the end function, and if something happens during that process, we need to destroy the pass-through object. Then we create a web stream, which is just a fancy method to convert the stream that we have into a web stream form, and then we return this stream. The logic for the web stream is something that I took from ElevenLabs directly. So this is just a convenience function to generate the correct types for what we need. With this, the stream speech function is finished. So the last thing we want to do is create a hook to easily use this stream speech function. So let's go to hooks and create a new file here and call it usespeech.ts. And for this one, we first want to specify that this runs on the client because we will use this hook client side. Then we create a function called useSpeech, which is the hook that we will use, which takes some options as an input. So we create a type for this, and the type will be quite simple. It will simply have an onError function. Then we import the useState because we want to have two states. First is loading and then an error that we want to be able to update. We import the text-to-speech request type because we will use this together with a use callback because we want to return one function which is going to be called speak. We wrap it in a use callback hook so that it doesn't lead to redraws, and we take the voice ID as an input and the text-to-speech request as well. We'll return a string, which is going to be a URL to read out the file. And then first we say if we're still loading, then we return null. Then we set is loading to true and set the error message to null. We create a try catch block, and then we take the result from the stream speech function that we have just defined. So let's import this as well. And then if the result was not okay, we log an error. If it was okay, we take the value, call it a stream. We create a new response with this stream type. We create a blob from the response. So this is the blob where the audio file will be put from ElevenLabs. And then we create the URL to this object and return the URL. In the error case, we log the error and call the setError function. Of course, we also need a finally block. So if after all of this, we set is loading to be false. We need to add the dependencies for is loading as well as the options. And then we return the speak function as well as the is loading and the error types. With that, we have finished the implementation for the useSpeech hook. So next, we can add this logic inside our component to actually speak the summaries. So let's jump there. To show the UI, we head back to our unread message summaries component. And first we import both the useSpeech hook and also the type text-to-speech request from the ElevenLabs API. Then inside this component, we now need to initialize a few things. First, we extract the speak function from the useSpeech hook. Then, in order to have something actually spelled out, we need to have an audio element that is responsible for displaying audio. Then we create a play audio function that gets a text as an input and creates a request data object with the text together with a model ID. We use the Flash model, but there are also other options such as the multilingual v2 and the turbo one, which serve different purposes. Then we use a try catch block to extract the audio URL from a call to the speak function that we defined in our hook. We give it a voice ID and add the request data. We log the audio URL, and if this actually has a URL that we can play, we check if the audio element is there, and if yes, we pause it and assign the newly created audio URL as the source and play this. If there's no audio element, we create a new one with the URL, set this as the audio element, and then play. This has all the functionality, so let's jump into the UI part to actually call this. And we need to scroll all the way down to our read button, where we can now simply call the onClick function with the play audio that we just defined and with the text we hand in the item.summary. Then we also have the read all button, where we already prepared the summary as mapping over all the summaries individually, connecting them. So all that's remaining for us to do is call the play audio with the summary. Finally, whenever we close the dialog, we want to add a little function that will stop playing any audio. So let's add this on click. If there is an audio element, we call the audio element.pause function. And with that, we now switch to the browser. We tap on the what did I miss button. So our message summaries are now created again. And we can now tap the read button and
Cassandra's interest has shifted to beachcombing and crab pots. While Cassandra describes Leonore describes Leonore's appearance as unnerving. Test user details a strange handshake and lizard into world. Cassandra's interest has shifted to beachcombing and crab pots. While Cassandra describes
everything works just as we expected to. So that's great. But now let's add one more functionality. This last feature is giving the users the option to select a different voice for reading out these messages. So let's jump back into the code, and next to the stream speech action, we will add another action, and we call it getVoices.ts. And first we specify again that this should actually use the server directive. So we want to execute this server side. Then we define the function, we call it getVoices. And first we need to import the ElevenLabs client because we want to initialize this using the API key that we have. And after that we query the voices by calling the client.voices.search endpoint. And we don't want to include all the voices that there are because this can have performance implications. So we're just fine receiving the first 10. And after getting these responses, we now can return them. This will be a voice object, and specifically an array of voice objects. So it's good to know and keep that in mind. Next, we jump to our hook, the use speech hook. And in addition to the speak function, we now want to add another one called getVoices so that we can call the action that we just defined and import it easily using the hook. So first let's define the function, and we say const getVoices, we use the use callback hook, and then we will return an array of voice objects. And for that we first need to actually import this. So we go all the way up and import voice from the ElevenLabs API. And while we're at it, let's also import the getVoices function from our actions. We import this as getVoices action, so that we don't get confused with the getVoices that we want to return here. And then we simply call this function that we have defined and return the voices, so the voice array. And we need to add this at the bottom here so that we can import it inside our component. So let's jump back to the unread message summaries component, and let's start by importing a few more things. First, we want to use a use effect hook to load the voices whenever the component gets mounted. And then we also need to import the voice object as well as the select component, which, as you can see here, is a shadcn component which has a drop-down of things we can select, which is exactly what we want to do. So we can use this component. We add two more state variables here. The first one being the voice ID, which is going to be the ID that we want to call the ElevenLabs API with. And the second is going to be the array of voices that we will dynamically load. So let's do this next. We import the getVoices function from our useSpeech hook that we just defined, and then create a useEffect hook. When we create a fetchVoices function, we log that it's called, and then call the getVoices function that we just imported. And of course, we need to add the dependency to it here. And after calling this, we set our voices to be the voices that we just received from the API. And we see this is still getting an error because we're not actually calling our fetchVoices function, which we change now. Now with that, we have the voices being loaded. However, we are currently not displaying them. So let's scroll all the way down and let's show them next to the unread message summaries title. So let's add a div here with a flex layout and justify between. So we want to have the maximum distance between the two elements. And then let's add a select element with the value of voice ID. That's the state variable we just defined. And whenever the value changes, we want to update this voice ID. Then we create a select trigger that has a select value element inside. This is just how you do it in shadcn. And then for the content, we map over all the voices, create a select item with the key of voice ID and the value of voice ID, and we simply display the voice name. With that, the UI should be ready. So let's see if this worked. And we can now tap on the What Did I Miss button. The summaries will be generated, but we already see the select element here. We can see the drop down. We can start with Rachel, for example.
Aiden is working on a list of random sentences.
See, that doesn't work because what we're still doing is using the same ID over and over again. So what we need to change here is inside of our play audio function, we still hand the same ID. So instead of the same ID, let's use the voice ID here and let's try it again. We select Rachel and let's try to read this out.
Cassandra is now obsessed with beachcombing and searching for light switches, while
Let's
Cassandra
try
describes
Domi.
finding hundreds of crab pots. Test user
Marcus sped up due to road work. Test user expressed regret. Amanda requested a giraffe.
Let's try Roger.
And Reynard experienced...
Mary expressed concern about the potential embarrassment of her calculator's history compared to...
Everything works flawlessly, just as we expected. And the user can now read out the messages in a voice they like. So we achieved just what we wanted. Great job. The result we're getting is quite impressive. We can read out AI-generated summaries from scratch just by using the ElevenLabs API. We have even just scratched the surface of what ElevenLabs can do. For example, we could also clone voices, so have separate voices for each of the users representing their real voice and just cloning them when we summarize the messages. If you're interested in a demo for something like that, leave a comment below. You can also check the link to the full project in the description of the video. And with that, I want to finally say,
Thank you for watching this video and following along.
If you enjoyed it, please consider liking this video and following the channel to support our work.
bye!